Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So this is a video for hypothesis testing part 4, chi-square test of independence. The purpose of chi-square test of independence is to study the relationship or association between two qualitative variables. To test the independence between the rows and columns of a contingency table. The data are displayed using contingency table, and the contingency table has R rows, C column, and hence R times C total cells. There are three assumptions you need to address before conducting a chi-square test. The first one is random sampling. Observation should be randomly sampled from the population of all possible observation. The second assumption is independence of observation. Each observation should be generated by a different subject, and thus no subject is counted twice. And the third one will be size of expected frequency. When number of cells is less than 10, and particularly when the total sample size is small, the lowest expected frequency required for a chi-square test is 5. However, the observed frequency can be any value including 0. I will explain to you what is expected frequency later on. So in any hypothesis testing, we should start with step 1 by stating the statistical hypothesis. So in the chi-square test of independence, our null hypothesis will be the two variables are independent, not related, or not associated. Choose one word that best explain or represent apa yang soalan tanya. And your alternative hypothesis will be the two variables are dependent, related, or associated. Step 2, find the critical values. So as you know, critical values separate the critical region with non-critical region. So please refer to chi-square distribution table. Okay, it's always right tail test with degree of freedom row minus 1 times column minus 1. Okay, so it's always right tail test. In step 3, we are going to test the hypothesis. So you may use the p-value method as before, or you can use test statistics method, okay, which is the chi-square test. So chi-square, okay, is equivalent to summation of O minus E squared over E. Okay, so where E is your observed frequency, frequency yang you dapat daripada your study or your survey. E is your expected frequency. Ini yang saya ada mention dalam assumption number 3. Expected frequency should be at least 5. So how to calculate your expected frequency is your row sum multiply with the column sum divided by your grand total. And the degree of freedom will be row minus 1 times column minus 1. So this is an example from the SPSS, okay, output from SPSS for chi-square test. So from here, okay, we can see that we have two variables. The first one is preference for magazine, and the second one is the location of the reader. So the two variables are preference for magazine and the location of the reader. We have a total frequency of 88 here. And as you can see, SPSS output also give you both the observed frequency, which is count, this is the observed frequency, and also the expected frequency or the expected count. So I take an example here. We have 32. Okay, frequency for those who prefer financial review and the location is urban, the frequency is 32. So 32 here is the observed frequency. 38.2 on the other hand is the expected frequency or the expected count. So macam mana dia dapat 38.2? So the expected count for financial review urban is the total row total, which is 56, multiply with the column total 60, divide by your grand total 88. So you dapat 38.1818. But here, since we use 1 decimal places, so dia bunda jadi 38.2. And same goes to the other cells too. If kita ambil example this one, Newsweek Rural, the frequency is 4, the expected frequency is 10.2. So 4 is what you observe, but 10.2 is the expected frequency for Newsweek Rural. So the expected frequency for Newsweek Rural is the row total, which is 32, multiply with column total 28, divide by 88. So 32 multiply with 28 divide by 88, you dapat 10.18. So dia bunda jadi 10.2. Okay, and actually not necessarily you kena kira gunakan formula tadi tu. You can also simply add or subtract. Okay, so if this one 38.2 plus 17.8, you dapat 56. Sama juga here, 38.2, if you plus 21.8, you dapat 60. So you boleh plus minus to get the expected count or the expected frequency. Okay, another thing is the Pearson chi-square is here. The value for the Pearson chi-square is here. Okay, this one. And this is the p-value. Okay, so the formula for this Pearson chi-square, this one, is actually yang inilah. Okay, the summation for observed frequency minus expected frequency squared over E. And you need to do all this for every single cell, and then you total up. You will get your Pearson chi-square. I will show you later on dalam example. So kita continue with our hypothesis testing. Alright, so step 4, we make decision whether to reject or not to reject our H null. So nak reject or tak, whether to reject or not to reject ini sama macam sebelum-sebelum ni. Okay, so if you are using the p-value method, if your p-value is less than or equal to your alpha value, thus we reject our H null. If it is greater than our alpha, we do not reject our H null. If you are using the test statistics method, if you calculate the chi-square value, it is in the critical region, we reject. Non-critical region, we do not reject. So cara dia adalah sama saja macam sebelum-sebelum ni. And once you dah make your decision, don't forget to make conclusion. Okay, you need to answer what the question want and conclude whether there is or there is no enough evidence to support the claim. So let's straight away tengok example. So in this example, a researcher wishes to determine whether socioeconomic status of a person is related to the person gender. So we have two variable and both are qualitative variable. And then the term ataupun word yang dipakai dalam soalan ini adakah related atau tidak. So dia pakai word related. Okay. So from the output kita boleh nampak juga dia bagi tahu the two variables are gender and socioeconomic status. We have a total of 200 respondent. So kalau kita dalam soalan ni dia ada minta you cari A, B, C and D. Alright? Dia minta you cari A, B, C and D. So I'll explain. Saya ada explain dalam next slide, but then I think I'll just show you how to calculate it here. I think it will be easier for you to see. So untuk A ni, okay, A ni is the expected count for medium male. Okay, so how to find the value of A? So to find the value of A, you simply multiply the row total. Okay, this one, row total 91 times column total here 95. Okay, divide by 200. So you dapat 43.225. So since here dalam output dia pakai 1 decimal places, saya bunda jadi 43.2. To find B, okay, you can use this formula or you can simply buat expected count, okay, total expected count to that particular row. So the total expected count to this row adalah 91. So 91 minus expected count untuk low 21.4 minus expected count untuk A yang kita baru kira tadi 43.2. So 91 minus 21.4 minus 43.2, you dapat 26.4. Kalau you still nak pakai formula tadi pun boleh juga. Row total 91 untuk B, multiply with this one 58, the column total, divide by 200. 91 times 58 divide by 200, you dapat 26.39. Kita bunda jadi 1 decimal places je lah. Okay, so that is how you calculate your expected count. Okay, so sama juga untuk C. So kita dah ada nilai A 43.2. Kalau nak cari C, you can simply buat C sama dengan 95 tolak 43.2. You dapat 51.8. Okay, kalau you nak kira pun boleh juga. Jawapan dia should be the same lah. Cuma bezanya sebab kita bundakan to 1 decimal places. Tu yang jawapan mungkin lari sikit kalau you pakai formula. Okay, and in table 10, okay, apa value yang you ada is this one. The first one is Pearson chi-square punya value. The degree of freedom sama dengan 2. Okay, macam mana dapat degree of freedom 2? Okay, kalau you tengok dekat sini, kita ada 1, 2, 3 columns and we have 2 rows. So, degree of freedom sama dengan row minus 1, column minus 1. That's why you dapat 2. And ini pula adalah your P value. Okay. So, kita pergi tengoklah soalan-soalan dia. Okay, so for question number 1, state the null and alternative hypothesis. So, for our null hypothesis, socioeconomic status is not related to gender. We have the two variables and saya gunakan term related. Kenapa pakai related? Sebab dalam soalan dia pakai related. Kalau dalam soalan dia kata associated, then your null hypothesis dipakailah not associated. Alright? Your alternative hypothesis, socioeconomic status is related to gender. Okay, please keep in mind that your null hypothesis tu adalah yang not related, yang not associated ataupun yang independent. Okay? So untuk B, calculate the value of A, B, C and D, saya dah tunjuk tadi. Okay, you can either use this formula or you can plus and minus for each row or each column. So the next question is, using the chi-square test, conduct the hypothesis testing at 5% level of significance. So in step 2, we should find our critical value. So since we are using 5% level of significance, so our alpha will be 0.05 with degree of freedom 2. So this one, row minus 1, column minus 1. Thus, chi-square 0.05 with degree of freedom 2 is equivalent to 5.99147. This one from the table. Okay, and if you look back at our SPSS output, given the chi-square value is equivalent to 4.60. So chi-square right tail. So our critical value is 5.99147. So here is our critical region. Kita calculate our chi-square, kita dapat 4.60. So 4.60 is not within the critical region. Thus, we do not reject our H null. So if we do not reject our H null, there is no enough evidence to conclude the claim that socioeconomic status is related to gender. Now, if the question asks you to use the p-value, okay, to test at 5% level of significance, so our alpha value is 0.05, and given from the SPSS output, our p-value is 0.101. So since our p-value 0.101 is greater than alpha 0.05, thus we do not reject our H null. Thus there is no enough evidence to conclude the claim that a socioeconomic status is related to gender. So by now, you should realize that no matter which method you choose, if one method kita do not reject, the other method also should give you the same decision, the same conclusion. Okay, now let's move to the next example. So in example number 2, a researcher wanted to study the relationship between gender, this is our first variable, and type of handphone use. So we have two qualitative variable. Gender is qualitative, type of handphone use juga adalah qualitative variable. So dia nak tengok whether these two variable ada related atau tidak, whether there is a relationship between these two variable or not. So she took a sample of 530 adults and recorded the information. Table 6 and 7 provide the result of the analysis. So as you can see here, we have gender, male and female. So we have 1, 2 rows, and type of handphone we have 1, 2 and 3 column. So saya just nak cerita sikit kat sini. Our degree of freedom will be 2 minus 1 times 3 minus 1. So you dapat 2. Our grand total is 530, which is equivalent to our total sample. And given adalah your observed value ataupun observed frequency and your expected frequency. So again, I just want to give you a quick reminder. Expected observation adalah row sum multiply with column sum bahagi dengan grand total. Okay, so you kena tengok row sum and column sum accordingly lah. So if you nak calculate this one, then dia punya row sum is 280 and dia punya column sum is 160, and the grand total will be 530. So this is another output. Pearson chi-square A. So dia tak bagi nilai A. Degree of freedom 2 and the p-value is 0.002. So based on the output, answer the following question. So compute the value of A. So A ini adalah chi-square. So formula untuk cari chi-square adalah summation observe tolak expected kuasa 2 bahagi dengan expected. So please take note that kita ada summation. So you buat untuk the first cell, second cell, sampailah the last cell yang you ada. And kita dapat 12.3462. State the null and alternative hypothesis. So in this example, gender is not related to the type of handphone used, and our alternative hypothesis will be gender is related to the type of handphone used. And using the p-value approach, test at 1% level of significance whether there is a relationship between gender and the type of handphone used. So we are using alpha 0.01. P-value given in the output is 0.002. So since p-value 0.002 is less than alpha 0.05, thus we reject our null hypothesis and conclude that there is enough evidence to conclude the claim that a socioeconomic status is related to gender. So I guess that's all for hypothesis testing, and I think this is quite simple. So please make sure that you know how to find your expected frequency and also how to calculate your chi-square. So thank you everyone.